Hi, Dr. Beal. This is my video of my interview that I did with two 5th, 6th grade elementary ed students who were in social studies classes and who have done had social studies classes before. Both of them said that right now they're not really doing a whole lot of social studies in their classes. They're more focused on, science, math, English in their classes, so there's not really a lot of time for social studies. I each asked them 5 questions each, so a total of 10 questions, and then I made up 3 questions. So I asked 10 questions off of the interview question list she gave us, and then I made up 3. So I have 13 questions altogether. The first girl I interviewed, I asked her, I let her look at the questions, and she picked which 5 she wanted. So she wanted to answer the first one, which was, do we have a king in the United States? She said no. I was like, do you know where they have a king? She was like, I think the UK has a king. I was like, yes. So then I asked her, does the United States have a president? She said yes. Instantly, we have a president. She said, I didn't have to ask her who the president is. She already knew. She said Joe Biden is the president. So then I asked her, do you know what the president does? And she knew some, but she didn't know have as much of the wording of it. She said makes laws. I was like, yes, the president makes and enforces the laws written by Congress. So I kind of gave her a little best I could, told her what Congress is and what they do. I asked her, do you know how the president becomes president? She said, is elected. I said, yes, the president runs for office, is elected by the party, and then the American people vote. And there's 2 main candidates, a candidate from the Republican Party, and then a candidate from the Democratic Party. And whoever wins with the most votes from the people, from the, I can't think of the word right now, has, you don't win based on the Electoral College. That's it. I couldn't think of it. The Electoral College. Whoever has the most votes, it's like 260, I think it is, or something like that, they win. So I kind of, explained it to her. I asked her, do you know anybody else who was elected? She said Donald Trump. That's somebody she knows. So then I was like, well, there's other elections you have. You have small elections for, mayor, things like that. I was like, even your schools. I was like, when you have prom, you have a prom king and a prom queen. They run. They hand out their little flyers and whatever they can to get you to vote for them, and then you vote, and then they win. So there's other little elections. Another example I gave her of someone who's elected. It's a different type, but these were Lumbee girls I interviewed. So I said, when you have the Lumbee pageant, you have these different girls who run, and they answer the questions, they do the interview, they have on their regalia, and they get judged on all these things. And they run. They're elected. In a way, they're elected. The judges vote for them. So that's different but similar in that vein. Another one actually I told her about the tribal chairman. The tribal chairman is elected to office. The tribal chairman runs, and then the people of the Lumbee tribe who are registered with the Lumbee tribe, they go and vote on a tribal chairman, and then you have a new tribal chairman. So another question I asked her was, who do you think is the important woman in history? And she said Rosa Parks. That's what she thought was important. And I asked her, why do you think Rosa Parks is important? And she said, because Rosa Parks helped with racism, like helped in racism. And I was like, do you remember how? Do you know how she helped in racism? How she helped with racism? She said, because she wouldn't give up her seat on the bus. I asked her, that was the question of who is the most important woman you've heard of. And she said Rosa Parks. And that's like one of the names she knew and thought of. I didn't have to push it. She knew it. So she learned about Rosa Parks. So then the 3 questions I created, asked her, do you like social studies? She said actually she didn't like social studies. She doesn't really know as much about social studies because they haven't really done social studies in her classes. They've been doing a lot of science right now. And she thinks because she doesn't like science, she won't like social studies. So I'm like, social studies is fun. Like, I'm a huge history buff myself. So I was trying to, like, push her to, like, this is something fun. It's interesting. It's not something boring. So I asked her, what have you learned about in social studies? And because they haven't really went over a lot yet, I asked her, well, have you learned about it in the past? She's like, in 4th grade, they learned about social studies. I'm like, do you remember what you learned? She talked about how they learned about presidents and, like who the first president was, stuff like that. And I was like, do you remember how you learned about presidents? She said, like, they read passages, worksheets, a lot of worksheets. They weren't learned about the Civil War. The 5th question I asked was, do you know what life was like in your parents' time? And she said they had, like, old phones. I was like, yes, they had, like, rotary phones. The internet wasn't out yet. You didn't have smartphones. She knew things like that, like, she didn't know that much about what life was like in her parents' time. So I actually told her, like, go ask your parents, like, talk to your parents after this is over, like, ask your parents, what did they do when they were in school? What was life like for them growing up? So then, the other student I interviewed was actually her sister. So the 5 questions I asked her was, do you know what state you live in? She knew, of course, North Carolina. So then I asked her, do you know what some of the other states is in? And she just instantly, before I could finish writing one down, she was already in the next one. She went through pretty much almost all 50 states. She just kept ticking them off. The states she knew. So then next I asked her, do you know who pays for things like schools, parks, roads? She said she heard the government pays for them. I was like, yes. And I was like, do you know how the government pays for them? She's like, taxes. I was like, yes. They use tax money to pay for things like your public schools, building and redoing roads, public parks. All that comes from people paying their taxes. I asked her that, have you visited any places in North Carolina that can, like, tell you about the history of North Carolina? So we actually talked about a couple different places, like she's went. She told me how they went to the North Carolina Museum. And she said they actually went to, she doesn't remember where it was or what it was called, but they went to an old tobacco farm. So they learned about, like, the machinery they used back in the day to, like, get the tobacco out of the fields. Other places they've went to learn about things. They've been to the Fort Fisher Aquarium. So she's went to different historical places. They went to the battleship in Wilmington. She is a Lumbee, so she goes to the powwows. So she's learned about Lumbee heritage and Lumbee culture. Robeson County, our heritage and culture, and how we fit in with the rest of our state. So then I asked her, if you were planning a trip, somewhere, how would you like know how to get there? She said like she'd use her phone, GPS and maps. I was like, yeah, that's all ways to do it. They just recently went on a trip to Arizona, and they took a plane. So they had to buy, and she told me how they did that. They had to get tickets. They had to go on the internet, buy tickets. They had to find out how to get to where they were staying. So they had to use Google Maps. So they had to do different things like that. Like, and she was saying they've camped before, so they've used like compasses and things like that. They've went camping before. And then I asked her, do you know of any current events, what's going on currently around the world? And she said the most recent thing she's been hearing of, she didn't actually have the name of the place right. She was talking about what's going on in Israel-Gaza situation. So I was like, do you know how you've learned about this? She's like, through the news, through the internet, social media, your family talking about it. If you're at church, if you're at school, they're talking about it. Newspapers, it's on newspapers, it's on magazines. You're hearing about it in all different kind of ways. So that's different ways she's heard about it. So this is my interview with 2 elementary education students. Thank you.